Welcome back to the Mustang build. And where we left off, we had a running and driving frame, but what I had issues with was the motor was not strong enough or didn't have enough torque. Here, we're just running one of these out of a SG90 servo, and this thing's rather big, so it could push the frame as just the frame, but as soon as you put the car on it, it had no power. And so I upgraded that to an N20 with the gear ratio. It's a high RPM N20, high RPM, high torque. So it's got about 3,000 RPM. And I'll show you what I've got here in just a second for how we've designed this. But what we're gonna do, we're gonna opt for external charging on this. We can do internal charging, but for right now we're doing external. So we'll have a battery charge controller externally that we can charge it with. We're going to run a 3 volt to 9 volt boost converter. Let me get this out of the package. All right, so we've got the battery, and it's going to run to a boost converter that's going to take it from 3 volts to 5 volts constant. And from there, it's going to run to the wireless receiver. This is the one out of the Civic build, but I'm going to use it for testing. And then from there, it'll run to the ESC. Okay, so we'll have from the receiver to the ESC, and from the ESC to the N20. And then we're going to stick with the same linear servo, but for building this circuit, I'm going to use this micro 2.1 gram servo, just so we can see it function. So let's start assembling this thing and seeing how it looks, how it works. So we're going to take this boost converter here, and I'll just stick wires in. On here it says VI and VO, voltage in, voltage out, and it's going to share a ground. And so voltage in from the battery, I'm just using one of these JST connectors that hooks up to the battery. And so voltage in, you know what, let's go this way so we can set this thing kind of flat and bend this over. Kind of like that. Okay. Yeah. Let me grab the solder. Kick the fan on. Move that fan a little bit closer. All right, now I'm gonna do ground, and we're gonna have to cut this ground wire to splice it so it's a shared ground, but we'll cover that here in just a second. I have ordered new solder tips because mine have become unbearable to work with. You can take care of them and they last a long time, but so for voltage out, we're going to use a servo wiring harness. I cut the signal wire off, and we're just going to run the positive through here. Twist that up a little bit so that it'll fit through. we go. So now everything's hooked up. We're going to have to interrupt this ground, and this is also where we're going to add an on-off switch. Same on-off switch that we use. So this is going to be, I'll just show you. We'll interrupt it like right here, and strip that off a little bit, maybe a little bit more. There we go. Okay, and then these two are getting put together. Just like that. And then this is going to run to a wire to the ground switch, and from the ground switch back to this. So let's grab us a wire that we can use. Okay, so I've got some wires here, and we have the shared ground for the boost controller and the ground for the battery. And we're going to run the two wires for the battery together. Just like that. Let's go ahead and solder this together. There we go. Horrible solder job, but it'll do. And I'm just gonna bend this over just like that. And we're gonna run a little bit of shrink tubing onto it. Okay. Twist the ends of that together. Slide this up and over, just like that. Shrink it down. There we go. Then we have these, and I'm gonna twist them together just like this. Well, actually, how can we shrink tube this? We're gonna want shrink tubing on that part right there. Let's go ahead and attach this to here, and then connect these two. And let's add this one in line. Hook it up. Fan iron. Add some solder to this. There we go. shape that how we want it. And that shrink tube shrunk a little bit. All right, that took some doing, but I got the shrink tube where it needed to be. So now we have ground coming from the boost converter shared with the ground for the receiver, and the ground for the battery. There's these two that aren't connected, right? They're going to the on-off switch. We've got to tin the wires for the on-off switch, or tin the prongs, the leads. Easy. We're going to keep the fan running because I want to tin these two. Now we can take this here and run one wire to this, and one wire here, and then we can slide the shrink tubing right up over. Okay, now you've got a pretty awesome little on-off switch and a battery setup, right? So, move that solder fan out of the way. We can connect this battery here to the receiver, and then, or to the power circuit, sure. And then we can run this to here, and you see the receiver kick on. All right, there's a blue light. Okay, and then if you hit the off switch, it turns off. You hit the on switch, it turns on. We have battery power. So the last thing to do for power is to set up the charge controller, which is USB-C, and we'll just go ahead and do it. So on here, it says battery negative, battery positive. It's the inside two loops. And we're just gonna hook up these wires just like this. Okay, so now we can plug our battery in, hook this other end to USB-C, and we'll be in the business of charging. Then we can take our battery and hook it up to our circuit, and we'll be in the business of running an RC car. Okay. The second thing to do, let's see here. I want the power leads on this channel, and the ground wire was up, signal wire was down on this configuration. We got this here. We can kick it on. It turns on, unless I have that wrong. Oh, there ain't no battery. That's why. Okay. We can kick it on. Receiver turns on. And the servo runs the steering, right? This is a linear servo on the Mustang build, but I'm using that one for reference. I'm showing you how to build the circuit so that you're not confused when I just show you what I did. But We'll take all of this and set it to the side, because now we have an ESC to work with. We're just going to desolder these pins real quick. So we're just going to get this fan kicked on real quick and pop these off just like that. These wires are too small on my liking anyway. And let's strip. That will do. And we'll want to test the polarity of this to figure out what direction that motor spins. If you need to change the polarity, just move the positive to where the negative was and the negative to where the positive was. And we'll reverse the rotation of the motor. There it is. That's done. Now let's take the motor, hook that up, tin it just a little bit, keep that up, there we go. It works. See if I can get away without tinning. Maybe. For testing purposes, it'll do. Okay. So now we can run the motor and ESC to the throttle channel on the receiver. That works. All is good. Connect the battery. Turn it on. All right, so we've got spinning from the servo and spinning from the motor. Now, we're gonna go with a ring gear configuration. So we're just gonna slip this on here, just like that. You'll be able to see that it works, right? Cool. And that is pretty much your entire setup. Everything that you're gonna need to run on this car. Now, let's look back at the Mustang here, because I've pre-done this. So we have a battery. Let me disconnect that so that we can see what we're doing. There we are. Linear servo, still in the same spot, same steering rack, same on-off switch, wired in the way that we did on here. We have the N20 motor running to a ring gear. It's connected to the spur gear right here, and it does its thing. We have a micro R4 Fly Sky receiver, just because it was smaller and I wanted more space. The boost converter is right here. See if I can move that so you can see the little transformer, little copper tower right there. And then there's the ESC at the front. So ESC, boost converter, microcontroller, motor, on-off switch. So now, if I kick on, I got this fancy G7 something transmitter. Fly Sky, running ANT protocol. And there we go. So now we've got all the steering we want, and we got plenty of pump. All right, move back and forth. Plenty of nice, easy control. does what it's supposed to. So the last thing to do on this, when we mount, here I'm going to pop the battery off for just a second. When we mount this up in here, it doesn't have quite enough room to turn the tires back and forth. They're getting caught up on the fenders at the rear here. So I think I've got to grind down this area here in order to make that fit. And then it's just a matter of, I've already put the magnets in here, and we've got to mount probably some brass tube and a magnet so that this will set on top of it. But for the purposes of just seeing if the motor can handle the power or handle the weight, if it has enough power to handle the weight, what is happening here? Let me turn the fly sky receiver on. There we go. The servo got out of whack there. But we ought to be able to set this thing in here like that. And she's got more than enough power to run. Yeah, it's getting caught up on the frame, but it's got more than enough power to run this thing. Definitely more power when it's off. It's not going to be as fast with the shell on, but